Please note that all of the views expressed by Ken Tanaka, our special guest for this episode, are his own personal views and do not represent the positions of any institution or company.
Hey everyone, welcome to Matters of State, where we discuss and explore underreported topics, news, and issues that should matter to all of us. We're coming to you from Foggy Bottom in the heart of Washington, D.C. I'm Lacey Brusky, and I'm joined by Drew Casey, Grace Chesson, and Kevin Ferdosi. Also joining us today is a special guest, Ken Tanaka. Our guest, Ken, is from Tokyo and has worked for many years in the space industry, specifically on commercial space issues and satellites. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Hi.
How are you liking life in D.C.?
Yeah, I like it.
Is it fun?
It's fun.
Today we'll be discussing governance of space and how it applies to extracting resources and the commercialization of space. Countries are looking for new ways to use space to their benefit. We're going to look at how international space treaties have addressed this. To start, let's simplify this technical language just a little bit. And at the most basic level, what is the Outer Space Treaty?
Okay. The Outer Space Treaty, that's signed by more than 100 members of the United General Assembly in 1967. And the treaty states that specifically that outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, are not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. So it's for the benefits of every nations.
So one nation can't use this, the U.S. can't go over and just stamp a claim on certain celestial bodies?
Yeah, it's actually fine to stick a flag on the surface of the moon, like the United States did by Apollo program.
Sure.
Yeah, that's for the benefits of the human beings, I believe.
Okay, so so by putting the flag on it, we're not marking it as a property of the United States.
I actually read that the United States was considering putting a UN flag on there as a symbol of humanity's progress, but then decided, screw it, we're just going to put an American flag on there.
Wow. So can you give us a little bit of a historical context behind the space treaty and sort of how this came about?
Okay. First of all, in 1957, the first human artificial satellite was launched by the Soviet Union. Then the following year, the United States launched its first satellite in 1960. Then, so they're trying to show each other they were capable of launching nuclear bomb. So it's like a race, weaponization, militarization, space race. Then the United Nations didn't want to escalate the activities. They made a claim they need to set up a treaties or international law of legal framework.
So pretty much to kind of regulate this space race.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
to regulate those activities.
Right.
Yeah, then made a claim in 1963, I guess. And that's the foundation of the Outer Space Treaty.
Oh, wow, great. So what other space treaties are in existence right now? Because I know that there's more than just this one to sort of govern space. What other ones do we have? Do we have a few others?
Yes, there are 5 UN treaties, that major UN treaties regarding space activities.
Okay.
And the Outer Space Treaty is the first one. The second one is rescue treaty, rescue agreement.
Okay.
So to rescue an astronaut if they have trouble.
Oh, so that's
trouble.
a safety policy.
Yes,
Yeah.
everyone has to cooperate with each other to help the astronaut who is in trouble.
Oh, wow.
And also Liability Convention. If a country launch a rocket and fail, and the rocket, let's say, fell into New York cities, then the launch country has to liable.
Oh, they're liable for that. Okay,
for
so it's holding them
damage
accountable.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a great overview of the kind of overarching treaties that govern. But how is this enforced? How could you possibly enforce these kinds of things? I mean, who's in charge of the responsibility of enforcing these treaties?
Yes, I'm not a legal expert, but it's the probably one of the biggest concern about the international law world, because there's an international like a legal frame, but who can enforce that? There are some like frameworks like WTO or Security Council, but if one of the members of the Security Council did something wrong,
They have veto power.
right?
So and that's, I think, another interesting part is that the United States hasn't ratified any of the space treaties except for the initial one. Isn't that correct?
The United States ratified 4 of them.
4 of them. Okay.
But they haven't ratified one of them, so which is the Moon Treaty.
Oh, okay.
So that prohibit the nations or any other non-governmental entities or person cannot own the land of the moon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they cannot utilize that.
So, has there ever been a violation of these space treaties? I mean, has this ever happened where somebody went against one of the treaties?
No, not so far.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Given that we don't have a clear idea of who enforces the treaties that we do have in place, if there is some sort of a violation that occurs of these treaties or some sort of conflict starts brewing, like let's say one of my satellites hits one of your satellites, do we have a very clear idea of how we solve these problems, or is that still a big question mark?
It's still a big question. So we don't know yet how to solve those international problems. It's not only about space, but also about like conflicts, armed conflicts or wars. So everything the same. So
Absolutely.
Yes. One example is Soviet Union satellite fell into the Canadian territory in 1978, and that satellite has a nuclear power system, and then contaminated some of the areas of the Canada.
So this was kind of a violation, was it not?
Well, it's just an accident, but
It wasn't intentional?
not intentional.
Okay.
Just fell into the. But the satellite was supposed to burn up in there.
Oh.
But actually, they fell into the ground
in Canada.
in Canada and territory.
So were there after effects of that?
Not to humans, but the satellite crashed in the ground and spread a lot of debris that
Okay.
has like a radioactive materials.
So Russia then would be responsible, right? As the earlier law that we were talking about would be responsible for cleaning that up. Is that correct?
Well, that's the question. It's not clear in
Okay.
the agreement, but usually because it has a material that could harm human beings, so the United States had to notify the possible danger
You mean
to Canada.
Russia
has to
the
notify
USSR. Okay.
to Canada about it, but they didn't tell their satellites might have fell into the Canada.
So was the USSR responsible? What ended up happening in that case?
Well,
Who cleaned it up?
Canada and the United States did.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
it's a little complicated thing because the United States wanted to join in because they wanted to investigate it, to
Of course they did.
check the technology. Because at that time, USSR technology, in terms of this, surpassed the United States.
So they were ahead of us in that sort of space race as far as technology was concerned. And so the U.S. wanted to go up and investigate to see what kind of materials they were using.
I guess so.
Wow.
So it seems like, talking about the regulation and being able to govern, there's so much competitiveness. And yes, this started during the Cold War, but how likely do you think it is that, treaties such as this will actually be successful in governing how states and how different countries work and collaborate or compete in space?
It's a good question. But first of all, so in this specific case, the UN treaty didn't work. So actually, right now, this kind of laws, treaties in space, there are 5 UN treaties so far, but the last one was signed in 1975, And then after that, there's no other UN treaties because it's hard to develop a treaty, make a consensus, and actually it doesn't work, seems like. And so after that, a lot of international UN members developed a soft law. It's not a hard law. It doesn't have any enforcement power, but they developed a lot of guideline stuff. So now, in terms of space field, so the national treaties it doesn't seem to work, but instead they create a lot of rules. It doesn't have like enforcement power, but it
creates norms.
It's creating norms like a code of conduct.
Sure,
those stuff seems like it's working.
So seemingly that, and I think that goes into the sort of parallel where we talk about UN cooperation as far as human rights law is concerned, because they're kind of along those parallel tracks of everybody trying to cooperate, but sometimes it doesn't work. But it seems that in that case as well, soft laws and creating norms and sort of the naming and shaming game, like those who don't bandwagon and jump on board with these norms are outlaws and are kind of looked at in a negative light. So often that has a more powerful effect than the hard laws may, and enforcing the hard laws may even be harder.
Right, because it's still an early stage, because human beings is not actually doing anything in space. So we launch some satellites around the Earth, but we don't go to deep space.
Yep.
So it's still a matured stage. So that's why it's too early for humans to develop laws in space, I guess.
So to take a step back, it kind of seems like there are three different pieces that we're talking about here, or that these space treaties have tried to address. So, on the first side, we have this non-armament side. So we're trying to regulate weaponization, halt this competition. On the, the second is we have this kind of neo-colonial aspect where the treaties are trying to regulate or dissuade colonization of space, sovereignty, countries being able to go and plant their flag, on asteroids, on planets. And then the third aspect, which we'll probably get into more, is the commercial side, and being private companies, not just states, being able to go into the moon and other celestial bodies for mining purposes or for profit.
Yeah, so the treaty, I think, actually covers appropriation of celestial bodies and weaponization, right? Weapons of mass destruction in orbit. It doesn't talk so much about commercialization, like mining, which we're going to get to in a minute here. And the question is, does utilizing the natural resources of, say, asteroids, does that fall under the appropriation of a celestial body or not?
That's a good question, a great question. That's the point. So the Outer Space Treaty doesn't seem cover a commercial activity. They prohibit a nation to extract or claim sovereignty, but it doesn't mention about a private entity.
So my question is, if a country or a private entity, let's say a company, an American company, goes and starts mining an asteroid, wouldn't that be sort of a representative of the country? And then if so, would you say that by using that asteroid for mining purposes, you're kind of staking claim on it? Because if you're using it, if you're controlling it essentially, that means that someone else cannot come and use it. Even if you're not saying you're not allowed to come here, the nature of you being there is preventing other people from coming.
Right. There are a lot of words in the treaty that is ambiguous, like you mentioned use of space and appropriation. So the UN didn't specify what that means, what that meant. So if the appropriation means extracting resources from the celestial body, that in that case probably the treaty prohibits nations to extract natural resources. But
But there's multiple
Even-
interpretations, right?
Yeah, appropriation. We don't really know what the appropriation, national appropriation is, and also the nation has to supervise its private entities' space activities. But it's about supervise, but it doesn't mean the nation has to restrict the
Private interest.
private entities' activities. So in this case, we don't really know if the American companies go to an asteroid and extract resources or anything is a violation of the Outer Space Treaty.
So it's kind of an ethical gray area.
And
It's
we're talking about the legalities of mining. Just to ask maybe a question that is more obvious, but what are the companies looking to mine?
Well, there are two famous venture companies in the States. One is Planetary Resources, and the other is Deep Space Industries. And then probably they are expecting to extract something valuable like metal, rare metal, or like energy resources, and then extract them and return it to the Earth and then sell it and then make a profit. Probably that's what they wanted to do.
So the U.S. Passed a law recently at the end of 2015, I believe called the U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act. How does this law, or how do you think it might apply in the future towards this issue of mining in space and extracting natural resources from outer space?
Well, this act has broad implications. So space mining stuff is a small part of it. But this law, this act, allow U.S. private entities to go to space mining.
Oh, I'm wondering, what do other countries think about this? Because if the United States is interpreting this as not falling under appropriation, do other spacefaring countries agree? Are they going to start sending companies to mine asteroids as well?
There is a discussion that some lawyers are saying that it's a violation of outer space treaty, and then also some U.S. lawyers are supporting the act. Of course, the U.S. national act, but recently Luxembourg announced that they are going to develop a legal framework so that allow their private entities in Luxembourg could go to space mining. So,
Exactly. And Luxembourg actually has a pretty substantial space program, don't they?
yes, there is a huge satellite operator in Luxembourg. They are called SCS. They're operating like more than 50 satellites, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge company.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other countries are investigating this as a possibility for them in the future? Is Japan involved in this as well?
Well, in Japan is in the process of developing their space law. They developed a space basic law in 2008, and then now they're in a discussion of developing like a Space Activity Act or something like this to promote their private activities in space.
So would they be interested in mining as well?
Well, I don't know, but as a nation, Japan launched a spacecraft more than 10 years ago, and then that reached one of an asteroid and extract a sample, some materials, and then return it back to the Earth. So in 2010, that's the first time in history that the nation or anyone could extract a material from the asteroid and then return it back to the Earth.
Wow. They're kind of ahead of the game on that. So what else can we expect to see in the future as far as space policy is concerned? Is mining going to be the way of the future, or are there other opportunities for different private enterprise but also countries in space?
Obviously, I think in the future, as technology advances, not only nations but companies or even individuals can go to space and then do something like including space mining and probably building build like a hotel or anything on the moon or other celestial bodies.
Space tourism.
But it's still long way to go.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It's still kind of in its infancy.
Yeah, because I don't even understand how this is economically viable.
But what about the other possibilities of places like Mars where they have water? Because in the article where we had talked and I had heard about the Luxembourg program, they had said that it's so much more viable to bring things back from space than bringing it up to space from Earth. And that with gathering water, they can split for hydrogen and oxygen. And is that going to be a way of the future? Is that going to be a viable thing?
I'm not sure, but if so, it would be really nice.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, if it makes economical sense, that would be nice. Yeah, so that's why I kind of support the activities about space mining. Now, I'm supporting the U.S. Act or like allowing space like private entities to go to space mining and making a profit. I'm not sure about it, but just as a whole, as a human beings, if we found valuable things in space, and then we got a motivation to go to space, and that would be nice.
Mm-hmm. But are you at all worried about the ramifications of privatizing these things and we're all, this is all conjecture because this is so far down the line that we just don't know at this point. If they privatize certain things, there's a lot of other developing countries or economically poor countries that would miss out on this opportunity.
Right.
So does the UN treaty level the playing field for this? I guess I'm just curious as to the possible ramifications of this.
Right. That's interesting too. It's not only about space, but in history, the people or the United Nations always tried to level the playing field. Okay, let's say, for example, now there are less than 20 countries who can launch a satellite by themselves into space. And so what about other countries? For developing countries, it's not fair. So it's already the existing problem.
Yeah. It's all well and good, these treaties that are in place that have stipulations about, this is for the greater common good, this is only going to be for peaceful purposes, etc. But this is also where the neo-colonial idea comes back in. There are only, a limited number of countries that right now have the capability to embark on these projects. And so even if these treaties are in place that say this is set in place for the equal benefit of all countries, the vast majority of countries aren't able to participate. And if there is this commercial aspect with mining where there's a profit to be made, the vast majority of these countries are going to be behind the tide. And could this even, this broad theoretical question, could this even lead to a greater wealth divide and discrepancy between the wealthy countries and the poor countries that aren't able to do this?
Right. It's a big topic. It's like the balance between capitalism and socialism or communism, maybe. So to distribute the profits to everyone. It's a big questions.
And is this, have you seen, is this being debated on the policy level? I mean, we're talking about these treaties, so obviously there is discussion going into this. But has there been this targeted discussion on how it will impact the relations between these countries and the international development side?
I would think that the tremendous cost that you just described of putting a spacecraft out there onto an asteroid, onto a planet, extracting whatever you find there, and then taking it back to Earth so that you can use it, would probably make the richer countries or corporations that are capable of making that investment and extracting whatever they find, it would make them that much less likely to share that with, like we were discussing, with developing countries or the global economy at large. Because no, we put our taxpayers' money into this, put a lot of it in there. It's politically difficult, right, to manage a space program and have one that's successful, and it's difficult to raise capital if you're a private company. So anyway, that's just my take. Maybe that's really pessimistic, but
there will be a huge discussion about it if really private entities go to space and then do their activities and they make profit. But right now, it's a long way to go. So we have time to discuss and then develop a legal framework, even if it's a soft law.
Technology has just been moving and progressing so rapidly. And, you say we have time, and I guess there's probably I don't know if you have an answer to this or if anyone does, but do you have any sense of what kind of time frame we're looking at?
Well, the technology advanced very quickly, but in this sense, it will take a long time because, for example, when Japan did the sample return of the asteroid materials, they developed a spacecraft for many years and then launched it. And then that was in 2003. And then when they returned it to the Earth, that was 2010. So it took 7 years because asteroids are flying, the Earth is flying in space. So, and then you have to find an appropriate asteroid to reach. And so the distance is far away, so you have to fly for long years. And then right now, the United States is developing a spacecraft and then aiming to ascend it to one of the asteroids. The plan is like a few years, still many years to go. So even the NASA takes long years. So probably for private entities, they would take long. It would take many years to accomplish the sample return. And besides, we still don't know. We are not sure even if we reach one of the asteroid, we don't know there is valuable materials inside the asteroid yet.
We could come up empty-handed.
Right, or just a rock. So we don't know.
We don't know. It's a perfect way to end. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for joining us. We really appreciate everything that you've contributed and explained to us because this is all such foreign information to, I think, a lot of people and something we should all really know about. So for more information and to see the articles we've mentioned, just visit mattersofstate.org. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter to get our updates. Tune in to us next time. Thanks for listening.
The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot.